Today, and thanks for Stephen for being here as well.
This is about interaction, participation, deliberation together, collaboration.
The weaker democracy is, the less the needs of most people are taken into account.
Now, what could a written constitution do? First of all, it would be a statement of our values as a country.
Opportunities off the street and on the street.
I mean, 14 years old, a young Asian woman as the deputy mayor, go girl.
The fact is we've got a broken food system in so many different ways. So on the one hand, food is very cheap, but on the other hand, food poverty is immense.
The Big Tent is first and foremost an attempt to create a space where people proud of their traditions can come together and debate.
If we tilted the system back in their favour to put real power and resources in their hands, we would get a fundamentally different settlement in this country.
That special relationship that we have with the United States is based on the fact that we think, that we provide cognitive thought.
If we fail, we'll get sad, dead high streets. And if we succeed, we'll have completely changed our cities and towns in a way that we're remembered for a very long time.
Well, good afternoon. It doesn't feel like it was only 3 prime ministers ago that we were in Bristol for that. And what an amazing event that was. It was sunny, if you remember. We sat on hay bales, and it was a brilliant, brilliant chance to be together. Not for the first time since COVID, because that was Coventry, but it was great. And I think the film just shows a little snapshot of the range of opinions, conversations, and everything else. So this is leading on from that. And there will be more on the report back from Bristol. It's a packed afternoon. I'm going to be extremely bossy about keeping people to time. I'm looking at you, George Freeman, particularly. But now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Stephen Kinnock, Shadow Immigration Minister and Trustee of Radix. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be with you all here today at the Radix Big Tent Annual Leaders Summit. It's an honour for me to be a trustee of Radix, and now in our new partnership and incarnation working with the Big Tent. And it's a fantastic collaboration, which I think brings so many great new ideas, so much innovation, and I'm sure that we're going to hear a lot more of that today. I was reflecting on the last time we had our Leaders Summit a year ago, more or less, and we were just coming out of, I think, the worst of the pandemic, and we were thinking, oh, well, finally we're going to be going back to a bit of stability and a bit of calmness, and, you know, British politics is going to return to those grown-up policy discussions that our democracy thrives on. I'm not quite sure that we've managed to achieve that objective. So, second time lucky, let's make that work here today. I wanted to just say a few words about what Radix Big Tent is about, because I hope that will help you to kind of frame the discussions for the rest of today and to contextualize it a bit. I mean, it's very much about looking at the big issues that our economy faces, and it's really about this overarching question about how do we rebuild and regenerate our country. It's about driving the radical change that we need to achieve that, because we know, I think, that sticking plaster solutions are not going to work anymore. And it's very much about handing that role into our communities and to everybody in this room and beyond. Everybody has a role to play in this, because we're not going to deliver from the bottom up and the middle out unless everybody is involved. We've got to get Britain back on the right track, and that, by definition, is about saying, look, the wisdom does not all exist within a mile of Big Ben. This is about regenerating, rebuilding, and getting local action and innovation. And that's why we have such amazing events as what you just saw in Bristol. We're hugely looking forward to going to York, and we're going to be ensuring that we get outside the Westminster bubble, outside that 1 mile radius of Big Ben, in order to deliver the kind of ideas and innovation that you need in local communities. It's about achieving that long-term economic recovery, and reforming the investment system is what we're going to focus on in the hours that we'll be together today. I think it's fair to say that green finance is going to be an absolutely key theme for the decades ahead. And we've got to be looking at how we get that finance and support outside London and the Southeast into those small and medium-sized enterprises that need to scale up and start up, and to get the support that's required injected into those businesses that can be the game changers for the future. The net zero agenda is not a hindrance, it is an opportunity. It's a springboard for driving the growth we need, and also the jobs that we need, jobs that people in communities can actually raise a family on. A case in point is my constituency in Aberavon in South Wales, a prime example of an area that's right at the heart of those new economic opportunities. You'll know, of course, that it's got the largest steelworks in the country. How do we ensure that we transition to green steel making that's going to deliver the regeneration opportunities that we need to see? I think it's about green reindustrialization of our country through modern manufacturing, a renaissance in our modern manufacturing base. I think the collapse of manufacturing over the past 40 years, from 30% of GDP to 10% of GDP as it is now, has hit communities like my Aberavon community really, really hard. And there's a direct correlation between that collapse and the lack of an investment-driven industrial strategy and the current economic mess that I think we find ourselves in: stagnant growth, insecure work, flatlining wages, low productivity. So I believe that the collapse of our manufacturing sector is actually the root cause of many of the structural weaknesses in our economy. You can't have an innovative, enterprising, balanced and resilient economy without a strong and sustainable manufacturing base underpinning it. It really is as simple as that. The net zero agenda offers Aberavon and places like it around the country an exciting opportunity to get ahead again, to get ahead on sustainable growth, good jobs, and supply chain and energy security. We could lead the world in floating offshore wind. We can take advantage of rising demand for steel by putting Britain ahead of the pack in terms of embracing green steel making. It's now that we need to grasp those opportunities. We need the leadership and the radical thinking to make it happen. That means we need a government that's going to seize those opportunities through targeted investment, through understanding our country can't flourish unless we make use of all of the talents and experience and expertise of every single one of our people. I would therefore gently say to our Prime Minister that he should really look at some of the opposition he's facing on his benches around house building, around onshore wind, around the development that we need if we're going to get that levelling up agenda working, get the investment flowing. I think everybody around the table at this meeting would agree with that. So I think that's the message we need to send loud and clear. We've got to really stick to our guns on this, move forward with levelling up, move forward with investment, move forward with an industrial strategy that's going to deliver that modern manufacturing renaissance. Just briefly then about what's happening today. It is all about yourselves, about those interactive sessions, bringing experts, innovators together, sharing ideas for how we can drive our economy forward. We'll be looking back to the big tent in Bristol to learn lessons from there with Marvin Rees and colleagues. We'll learn lessons in rural regeneration from Germany with Karlheinz Roth, the CDU's mayor of Spiegelau, and Herbert Schreiner, the SPD's former mayor of Fraunau in Bavaria, and you're very welcome here today. Thank you to our international guests. They have co-created the Transformational Digital Village Initiative, We'll have those all-important breakout sessions ranging from housing policy to the NHS to monetary policy and dealing with the aftermath of Putin's barbaric invasion of Ukraine. We'll hear later from Councillor Keith Aspden, leader of City of York Council, and my esteemed Labour colleague in Parliament, the force of nature that is Thangam Debbonaire. So in a moment, we will be hearing from somebody who has sometimes been called the godfather of regeneration, and it's a real honour to have you here today with us, sir. Some may say that you were held back in your mission by the godmother of monetarism, but I won't make any further comments on that. So, but firstly, to introduce our keynote speaker, I am absolutely delighted to welcome to the stage my friend and colleague, George Freeman, a founder of Radix Big Tent, a driving force and a force of nature himself in so many of the work and projects that we're doing. George, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you all for coming. Politics is 9/10 presence in the room to shape the debate. And thank you, Lord Heseltine, for coming out of a very distinguished and very active retirement to continue to make the case for the agenda that we're discussing. Political economy is noble, and it is still something that should drive and energize this government and successive governments. And I think in the room is a yearning for some radical thinking about how we might embed it in whichever government is in power and hardwire it into the machinery of government. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you give a big hand to somebody who's got something very unique and powerful to say on all three, Lord Heseltine. Now, hopefully the microphone is working. I just observed, Joe, that I'm not late. I'm late in starting. Michael, you and I have talked a lot over the years. You've been a great force behind the scenes as well as in front of camera and in governments about the importance of this country shifting from being what it's become really in the last 40, 50 years, a service economy with so much of its deep science, technology, innovation, advanced manufacturing rather marginalized. We're still a manufacturing powerhouse. We're 9th in the world, 4th in Europe, but it's a smaller percentage of the economy. Can I just ask you, on the science and technology superpower piece, I mean, China is spending $240 billion a year, America $180 billion, $300 billion a year if you include defense, which you should. We're going to 20 billion. We may get to 22 billion. I mean, it's great, big increase from 15, but my argument is, well, it better be the best 20 billion in the world, and we better turn each pound into 10. And in a world where China, America, Europe are competing, can I just invite you to say something about how little Britain has an opportunity, and we've made it harder perhaps leaving the European Union, but has an opportunity, and how you might think about leveraging our position, our regulatory and procurement freedoms to punch above our weight again?
You remind me of 1973, when officials, I was Minister of Aerospace, put on my desk a submission for £6 million to finance some space venture. And the argument was, You know about the French and the Germans, Minister. They're always trying to get ahead and cheat a bit and all that. So this will give us a chance to catch up. It's very interesting. I said, if I were to agree to this £6 million, what do you think the embassies here would say to Paris and Bonn? I think they'd say the Brits are at it again and we ought to up the ante. So before I sign away the £6 million, would you be kind enough to tell me what the whole of Europe is spending on space and what the Americans are spending on space? Well, Minister, of course, we'll find out and come back and tell you. Good, I said. They did come back. The whole of the European budget was 200 billion, and the American budget was 6 times the size, 1.2 billion. And so I said, this is Toy Town, isn't it? Think that we are going to outpunch the French, who are going to unpunch the Germans, who are going to undermine the Italians, all scheming away, trying to nibble at a tiny fraction of the marketplace. We're going to create the European Space Agency, which we did. And by officials, my colleagues in government, when I said to Margaret, who had the post office, and to the DTI, who had, to the Ministry of Defence, who had defence interests, will you join me in trying to put together a European space endeavour? Margaret, somewhat predictably, said, your budget, but not mine. The Secretary of State for Defence said it would be a major threat to the Atlantic Alliance. We can't do that, but if you want to muck about, well, of course, it's entirely up to you. So we did muck about, and I said to British industry, what do you want? The French want a launcher, Germans want post-Apollo. What do you want? We want leadership in satellites. Fine. I got them, leadership in satellites, and we created the European Space Agency. We joined the launcher program and the post-Apollo program as part of the deal. That's the background. We got the leadership of satellites, but of course the British company that had the leadership was then sold to the French, who don't sleep. And now we've fractured the relationship with the European Space Agency. So the answer to your question is, you're deluding yourself if you think you're going to be a player on a national scale against the giants of China, India, and NASA, and the Pentagon. The American budgets on space and military defense are astronomical by European standards, way, way out of the stratosphere by ours. And so anything about being the new Silicon Valley is just for the hard right of politics to give them something to chew on. It's got nothing to do with economic reality or an industrial strategy. So that's an analogy in my experience. Just one last thing I would add. I became Secretary of State for Defence, by which time Geoffrey Patty was in your shoes. Dear Michael, so glad to see you've got now in the Ministry of Defence. You will remember that when you created the European Space Agency, the Ministry of Defence, it was against the Atlantic Alliance, and therefore we were not able to get the ministry to join in. Would you look at it all again? Well, Secretary of State, these are the arguments of the defence interest. They were rubbish. Absolute fiction out of the air. Simply, Turkey's not voting for Christmas, Ministry of Defence clinging on to its budget, nobody else was going to muck about. So, of course, I joined as Secretary of State for Defence, where I had been denied the support of the Ministry of Defence years later. And so these human lessons are ingrained in my view and my experience. Britain is grossly over-centralized. The central core is fragmented functionally, and everyone who's got a seat in the corner of power clings remorselessly to what they've got. And in all the discussions that we can have during this session, you will find the same phenomenon. Whitehall knows best, Whitehall is divided, Whitehall does not coordinate, and any suggestion that there should be a sharing of power or a devolution of power is resisted to the last man and the last round.
Thank you. Well, a slightly cheery news is that we haven't left the European Space Agency. I was there last week negotiating, and it's the most magnificent process, quite unusual, no smoke-filled rooms. It's very British, if I may say. It's entirely open, transparent, and bid-based. Every country bids in. I went with more money than others, and I was remarking on the process and was told, yes, this was designed by Michael Heseltine. So there's a little bit of Heseltinian British industrial strategy still living in Europe, but your point is really well made. And the reason I started there is actually the space economy is one that goes all around the country. From the Cornish spaceport we'll be launching in the next few weeks, the coding cluster, up to Glasgow satellite manufacturer, Strathclyde and the North of Scotland launch, Leicester Space Park. And it seems to me that unless we are going to be a player globally, it's going to be quite difficult for us to really drive those clusters. And can I just ask you about China, the China question? A lot of our universities are quite heavily dependent on China now for both student fees and research. Do you view that as inevitable and to be welcomed? We have to work with China, they're the coming power. Or do you think we should be a bit more strategic and more careful?
You should be careful whoever you work with, because you cannot foresee how alliances will fragment in an unpredictable way. I happen to be very pro-American. I happen to believe passionately in the NATO alliance and the Atlantic alliance. But I also know that it took 2 years for the Americans to enter the First World War, and they didn't enter the Second World War at all. Hitler declared war on America. And Roosevelt had given a categoric assurance in the preceding presidential election that he would not enter the Second World War. So if there were to be a confrontation in Europe, heaven forfend, would the Americans come? Well, today, of course. Would Trump, a new Trump, a right-wing Trump come? I don't know. But would you base your entire strategic defense strategy on the certainty that they would? I wouldn't. That's why I think that President Macron's initiative of saying that there should be a dialogue within the European nations along the security and defense lines is something we should welcome and participate. Just let me conjecture. Some threat to the broad coalition of European nations emerges. I'm not going to try and work out what it was, what it could be, but just conceive of that threat. Do you think that 27 nations would send 27 different armies to confront the threat? All with separate generals, all with central staffs, all with procurement systems that weren't interoperable? Doesn't make any sense. We all know that under the NATO alliance, the Americans would be in charge, but supposing the Americans didn't come, or waited, or hesitated. So discussing with our colleagues in Europe defense arrangements is common sense, as, of course, is a whole range of other issues like immigration, high tech, global warming, all these things, which are the great threats of tomorrow. Europe, we are European. Get wise, grow up, face the reality, and either you like them and work with them, or you think you can ignore them. If you think you can ignore them, goodbye and good luck.
So, thank you, Michael. I wanted to frame the levelling up debate in that context, because it seems to me that unless we're clear what our geopolitical vision is for Britain in the world, in space, in semiconductors, in the hot technologies, unless we're clear on that, we're going to struggle to do the devolve piece. But let's just turn to the levelling up agenda. I think we all believe it's a noble cause. To me, there's a huge opportunity for us to nurture these R&D clusters all around the country, not just the Cambridge, Oxford, London, Golden Triangle, but we've mapped them in Bays. It's quite a change in orthodoxy in Bays from giving the minister little announcements to actually mapping the R&D clusters all around the country. We reckon there are 30, maybe start with 10. but I mean the South Coast Marine Technology Cluster, the Cornish Coding Cluster, the South Wales Semiconductor Cluster, the Warwick Robotics Cluster, the Glasgow Satellite Manufacturing Cluster. These are real clusters of excellence. Michael, you've literally written the book and the paper and advised governments on this awful centralisation. Endless government funding over decades through vertical silos by departments owning their little bit. And your call, your model in the Coalition for the Single Regeneration Budget was a game changer. I remember it landing, and I remember George Osborne taking it very seriously, the Northern Powerhouse. Can I just invite you to speak to where you think we are now and the opportunity now to harness that devolution? Michael Gove is back in position. We've got mayors from Marvin here in Bristol, and Ben Houchin and Steve Rotherham and Andy Street and Andy Burnham, mayors keen to take the powers. Is this an agenda that you think we can still and should still drive through to empower those areas to drive their own economic futures?
Well, it depresses me infinitely because the devolution agenda is more or less dead on the vine. It had a huge surge under David Cameron, George Osborne and Greg Clark. And as the Chancellor said in his autumn statement, about half of England is now under mayoral authorities. Mercifully, the Conservatives won 2 of the big authorities, which meant that an element of the Conservative Party can't easily say we're going to abandon this experiment on the grounds that it's more bureaucracy or whatever it may be. So I think that mayoral-led authorities are here to stay, but it's a sluggardly process of trying to extend the numbers. And the first thing one should do, if one is going to devolve seriously, is to create units that are accountable and recognizable and have some sort of loyalty to which you can actually devolve the sort of power that is now based on Whitehall. The first thing you will discover, as the government has now discovered, although they don't admit it, is that you've got probably 250 too many local authorities. They say there's no room for no cuts in public expenditure. Believe me, I got rid of the districts in Scotland and Wales in the 90s. Nobody would dream of suggesting they should come back. We've got a handful of unitary counties. There is a massive opportunity to reduce the power structure scale and bureaucratic tiers by getting rid of the districts in the counties. That would take us down to something like 60, 65 local authorities, and guess what? That's what Redcliffe Maud recommended when he did his very far-reaching report in the 1960s. You then have to have directly elected mayors, because the councillor system does not give you that focus and dynamic. It spreads the responsibility very widely, and and putting it crudely, if one party has something like a 60-40 majority, it's very easy for that one party, built of the councillors representing the 60, to run the council in the interests of the 60. The 40, well, they don't vote there. Someone said to me in 1981, why do you bother with Liverpool? There are no votes there. It showed you an attitude of mind. So if you have directly elected mayors, they have to appeal across the constituency. And that focuses their mind on what the relationships need to be. Because they have to get elected across that wide constituency, they have to talk to the stakeholders in the community. They have to talk to the universities, to the quangos, to the head teachers, to the police, whatever it may be, to try and mold a community of interest in their strategies. And I would myself believe that those strategies should be a sine qua non of an approach based upon a local analysis, a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. That they're bidding to a central pot which George Osborne operated, but of course it's now been fragmented back to its functional departments. But bidding to that central pot on capital account would enable the government to enter into a meaningful dialogue about what the strategy locally should be and rewarding those who've got the best strategy. Yes, the best. Let the others catch up. They will catch up. If they don't win the first time, they will go to find out how the winners did. I did exactly this with City Challenge, and it had a transformational effect on the losers. The winners were already quite good. The losers, having bellyached like mad at having lost, then went off to find out how to win. And of course, everybody gained. So, local leadership, you have mayors here. Why are we the only advanced capitalistic country in the world that doesn't have a mayoral system? I'll tell you why. Because the councillors don't like mayors. It's a great diminution in their power structure. The local MPs don't like mayors. Why? Because the mayor becomes a bigger figure than the local member of parliament. And so you go on. Does Whitehall like mayors? No, because mayors actually are a threat to the functional budgets that now characterize Whitehall. And so there were no friends, and turkeys don't vote for Christmas, and that's why the whole mayoral structure, following on from Redcliffe Maud, has been by negotiation, and it is the slowest ship in the convoy. What we need, and this government's got 2 years, and if it had any sense, it would go hell for leather in this transformation of the relationship between the centre and the periphery, the local areas, and not just the more deprived areas. The Port of London is a classic example of where you need a unified drive to bring both sides of the estuary into one common ownership. Why? The Development Corporation in the East End of London, by any standards, was a remarkable transformation. Why did they stop when its time ran out? Why didn't they just go downstream? The Urban Development Corporation in Liverpool, why, when it stopped, didn't they go upstream to the next mile or so up the Mersey? It's all there, it's blindingly obvious. But until you suddenly realize Whitehall does not surrender its powers.
Michael, you've brilliantly taken us to the theme of much of this afternoon. How do we drive these levelling up clusters, and how do we support leaders locally, and particular finance? And your leadership on development corporations with Tyne and Wear, Docklands, Liverpool, they worked. And there are august think tanks in Westminster thinking about what might work when we've shown what works. And I know there are many people here today who'd like to pick up that history. Can I just ask you finally, and then we'll come to the floor, reflections on what the key was to really unlock that local leadership in Docklands, Liverpool, Tyne and Wear? What was the essence of those development corporations that galvanised the private investment and the local leadership?
I flew over the East End of London, and the docks had gone downstream. The public utilities had been modernised and gone. The children of the council tenants had all moved to the new towns, and here you had got 6,000 acres of derelict land. And I don't like derelict land. I don't like waste. And so I said, we'll have a development corporation. And then my official said, well, that's very good, but you won't be able to get that through Parliament without hybrid legislation, and that'll take you more time than you've got. So I said, okay, we'll show me the second worst site in the country. And they said Liverpool. I said, we'll take general powers and we'll designate London and Liverpool. That's how, but the formative thing, the thing that absolutely, I did all this in '79, as well as the Garden Festival and the Development Corporation and derelict land grant in the cities and listing the Albert Dock. So I thought I'd done a bit for Liverpool. And then they rioted. I said to Margaret, look, Tories, law and order, absolutely central. I'm your man. Got to back the police. But I think there's something more complex here. And I want to walk the streets of Liverpool. She unhesitatingly agreed. And I went. And I walked the streets. A couple of days, 3 days. Secretary of State, how marvellous to see you. Of course, it took a riot, and you've come, and self-evidently that's the truth. But I talked to people widely and generally, and they all knew what was wrong. You were wrong. You were wrong. He was wrong. She was wrong. They were wrong. Everybody was wrong, but never me. And so I thought, well, it's got a bit of a problem here. So of course, I should have gone back to London and said, well, how very interesting, I've learned a great deal, and I'll let you know how we're getting on. But I thought that won't cut the ice. So I walked the streets a bit more, and I produced a list of 30 things that I thought, with goodwill and local drive, could change the atmosphere. We could make this work. And that was fine. But then I said to myself, well, who's going to do it? And there wasn't anyone. And so I thought, well, I better do it. And so for 18 months, once a week, I went up and troubleshot. We had a notebook, a page, a project, and I had a team of secondees. And every week, I unblocked the blockages. And we haven't got time now, but I can show you a whole range of things that came out of that experience. Public sector partnerships, groundwork, very important peripheral urban regeneration process, the restoration of a slum council estate, whole range of things that I was able to help create in Liverpool. But there was no one in Liverpool. And so as I looked around and thought about it, where is the mayor? Where is the person to drive it? They don't exist in this country. Everywhere else they do. So I became totally convinced that we were over-centralized and there was no local dynamic, which I had proved could work.
Thank you. So let's turn to the floor. You may have said I'm working in vain, but my dream is that we get 20 or 30 of these clusters around the country with development corporations. There's a wall of international money that would love to come and invest in UK science research and innovation. They want to invest in property. I suspect most of these clusters could attract £500 million very fast to invest in science parks and infrastructure. We make it almost impossible, it seems to me, for investors to come in and invest in the region. So, some questions. Let's take three. Yeah, we'll go.
Can you do it one at a time, because I'll forget otherwise.
First question, second, third.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can hear.
Thank you, Lord Heseltine. It's great to hear from one of the big beasts again. I'm a surviving member of the Conservative Party, and I was born in Merseyside, so I remember you as the Minister for Merseyside. But I was a district councillor in South Cambridgeshire and a county councillor in Cambridgeshire, and I was very taken by No Stone Unturned and the devolution agenda, and I pressed very hard for the formation of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. But I have to say that the experience over the past 5 years with first a Conservative mayor and now a Labour mayor has been very disappointing. And I'm just wondering, given where we are in the way the country is set up at the moment, when you say there are 250 too many councils still, and I agree with you completely, by the way, do you have any practical suggestions as to how we might reduce that number?
Oh yes, just get rid of the districts like I did in Scotland and Wales. There's no problem, just get rid of the districts. Go unitary counties.
Unitary counties.
Yeah.
And getting that through the House of Commons?
Oh, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, I keep telling you, that's the whole problem. But that is, you know, the whole evolution from Redcliffe Maud has been sluggardly and by consent. And it doesn't, well, it does work. If you want to create the sort of vacuum in dynamic economics that we're talking about. Of course we're not, you see, the great thing about this is it's so easy to present cataclysmic consequences. Not a bit of it. We're all going to be a bit richer, a bit more prosperous in the next 10, 20, 30 years. That's the way the world is expanding, and we will expand a little bit with it. But will we matter? That's the question. Will we be a pace setter? Or will we become increasingly, and huge growth market, the tourist centre of the third world? All getting richer, all wanting to see an anachronism as it fades gradually away. What great empires do. They don't often survive.
I don't know if you're talking about the Conservative Party or the UK there, but we'll move on. Where was the second question? Yeah, gentleman there in the blue shirt.
you very much. That was fascinating. You're not coming across to me as very optimistic about the future. So I'm wondering if I'm wrong, and if so, what are the key changes that you would need to see to make you more optimistic?
Yes, well, look, as a politician, I know that I should come here to leave you feeling better in supporting me. Well, what's the point otherwise, you know? But of course it's dishonest, because I know perfectly well that there are no grounds for thinking that this country in a post-Brexit world is going to shine as an example. Brexit is a disaster. It's a psychological, political disaster of historic scale. Increasingly people know it. Even the journalists working for the Daily Telegraph know it. You can see in the way they slant their articles, the covering, the sub-paragraphs. Wherever you go, people say to me, it hasn't worked, has it? But then you get people saying, no, well, do it better, do it bigger. I mean, the deregulation thing, do you remember all that? 2,000 regulations being torn up. The only one that's happened in 6 years is to give bonuses bigger to the bankers, for God's sake. That's what we need, like a hole in the head. So Brexit was a lie, a fundamental lie. And huge numbers of people who know it, they're not enough yet saying it. We've got to reverse Brexit. We've got to become what we've always been, a major European player. And I could be optimistic and say, yes, it's going to happen, but I don't yet see how it's going to happen. And what I know is that my generation, much older than all of you, are going to bequeath to your generation and younger an empty chair in the corridors of European power.
So I think we may have finally found something we don't entirely agree on, because I'm a bit more optimistic. I think it was a hugely painful, divisive rupture. We're paying the price for it. I do think there's an opportunity not to race to the bottom in reg, but to set the international standards, make Britain more of a test bed, and position ourselves as a much more fleet and agile tech and science and innovation economy. But I think it'll take us 10 or 15 years. Let's take... Yes, question.
Tax credits then, because we've mentioned a lot about research and development and technology hubs. And as founders of a tech startup here in the UK, the R&D tax credits and the announcements in the autumn statement don't correlate with growth.
Yeah, I don't think we've got the detail quite well, and then I'll happily pick it up with you. I'm talking to the Treasury about it right now. Let's just go to clusters and the levelling up piece, please. Any other questions on how we attract this money and the sort of powers we need to give? I can see Marvin here somewhere. Where is he? Yes. That's not Marvin, by the way, but it is somebody with their hand up.
I'd like to ask, I'm Joel Cohen from the Royal Town Planning Institute, and one of the kind of curious parts of the devolution discussion that's happened of late is that though the democratically elected mayors that we have sometimes do have planning powers, they haven't always taken up the powers and used them to the full effect that they could do, and many of the devolution deals that are being done seem to be appearing without new planning powers. I wonder kind of what do we think the reason for this is, and is this an example where more accountability should be taken and exercised?
Michael.
Well, the first thing is to give them more powers. I mean, you're talking about clusters. I wouldn't start there. I'd start with schools and skills, because we know that there is a desperate shortage of skilled people. And I wouldn't start either with clusters. That's a Whitehall view about what should be happening that is good. I would start right at the other end and say, what are your strengths and weaknesses? What are your opportunities? How can you make this economy more successful? And then build up from there. But as I said, the first thing I would do, if I could wave a wand, when I got rid of the districts, I would give responsibility for schools, skills, and employment to directly elected mayors. And that would be day one. Day two, I would say to the mayors, I've got here the latest Ofsted report, which tells me that the following 25 schools in your area are inadequate. You'll want to worry about that. I will be in touch in 6 months' time. And if in 6 months' time to the day, I'd be there. And if they hadn't done something about it, I would do something about it. And I can tell you what I would do. I would sack the head teacher, and I would sack the governors, and I would replace them with locally talented people who were determined to do something about it. If you're thinking about leveling up this country and thinking about the younger generation, the quality of education in some of our schools is morally indefensible, and it is tolerated by the local people, either in the academies or in the councils, who know that these schools exist. Everyone knows where they are, like everyone knows where the slums are. But who does anything about it? So if you are going to devolve responsibility, you have to have accountability. Now, there are two accountabilities. One is the use of central money. You only back people who are doing a serious job with a serious measurement process of outputs. And that is absolutely fundamental to a changed attitude where central government backs projects emerging from down here, takes a view about how they can make them better. This is where the cluster comes in. If you've got a cluster in one mayoral authority and you want to liaise with another one, that almost certainly going to involve central government. Another one, quangos. And we have created, I've done my fair share, quangos. Do they have any responsibility for economic growth? No. And many of them would be appalled if you were to say to them, have you ever thought of the role that you in this cultural field or sporting field can have in creating jobs? You only have to think that to realize what an incredible market those cultural quangos could actually have.
Michael, can I ask you just one final question which goes to the heart of the financing piece we're going to explore? There's been a lot of talk about pension funds. The Canadian pension fund, massive investor, pays huge returns to Canadian savers and funds an awful lot of innovation and technology. We have huge pension funds here. Norfolk County Council decided in my patch to invest theirs in Iceland Bank a few years ago. Do you support the idea of pensions putting a bit of their money, which they've got from their local employees, into their own economies? I mean, perhaps not all of it, but are you a supporter of this idea that pension funds should put some money back in to help drive their local economies?
I am not in favour of anything that risks the pensions of the pensioners. And so any sort of directive which said you will hypothecate X% of your funds to any sector at all, anything at all, whether it's growth funds or it's overseas investment or whether it's the local economy or for roads, I would say I'm going to put trustees into pension funds to protect their pensioners. That would be my first instinctive answer. But if, on the other hand, you can open up the opportunities for pension funds to gain a market return from local investment, I'm in favour of doing that. But of course, there's another big issue here. It's called deregulation. And this is another one of these great clutch it and it'll help you views. We've been now in Brexit for 6 years. There has been virtually no deregulation. Well, I was responsible for deregulation for a couple of years under John Major. And I can tell you why there's been no big change. Because the difference between the law of the jungle and civilization is regulation. And the moment you start saying, all you've got to do is get the regulation, well, just try. Just take where we are now. The Grenfell Fire inquiry shows inadequate regulation. When the report comes out, there will be a clamour for more regulation. The cryptocurrency collapse this week has shown what can happen on a massive scale to huge numbers of investors if there is inadequate regulation. And so the more you look, you can see that actually coming down the road is going to be a great deal of cynicism about this idea that we can live in a deregulated society. What people don't understand, if they haven't been in government and don't understand the way the civil service works, it's quite simple. when a civil servant is told to regulate a system, they say it has to be watertight. And we know, they will say, that 1 or 2% of the population are rogues and villains and crooks. And they are armed by highly skilled lawyers longing to find a loophole in the new regulations. And so we will stop that before it happens. And thank God they do. When most people are thinking about regulations, they say, this is fussy, this is boring, this affects me, and I'm an honourable guy and I do a decent job. But the civil servant cannot rely on that 100% of the decency of human beings because it doesn't exist. That's why you have effectively over-fussy, over-intrusive regulation. And you try getting rid of it as a politician, and 6 weeks after you set the world free, you'll find that, bang, it gets you, because you created the vacuum into which the abuse jumped.
Michael, thank you. There are all sorts of people making eyes at me, generally in a good way, but they're becoming increasingly hostile. I think we could all sit here and listen to you all afternoon. Can I thank you on several counts? Thank you on behalf of the Big Tent and Radix for coming and for continuing to fight the good fight and to rage against the dying of the light of active industrial strategy and a belief in this country's ability to make the next generation more prosperous. Thank you for speaking as someone, a veteran, I think I can probably call you now, who inspires the next generation profoundly, which is part of what the Big Tent is trying to do, bring the generations together. And also somebody who inspires people across all the parties, and Stephen and I both here. Thank you profoundly for everything you've done and what you continue to do in helping to show us the mistakes of the past and the opportunities of the future. Thank you, Lord Heseltine.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
George, Lord Heseltine, thank you so much. I think you're right, we could have listened to you go on all afternoon. And I think one of the things that always strikes me about Radix Big Tent events is that there are people of integrity, generosity, innovation, but you don't get any bitterness. People are willing to share, to exchange ideas, to talk about what went wrong and what went right and what could change. So thank you very much for sharing that, and thank you, George, for keeping to time and conducting a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. So, it's now time to go back to those halcyon days of the summer in July, when we were in Bristol, and that was fun. So I'd like to invite to come up onto the stage, please, Professor Evelyn Welch, the Vice-Chancellor of Bristol University, and Marvin Rees, Mayor of Bristol. If you could come up and join us on the stage, that would be fantastic. And we can talk a little bit about your recollections and your reflections on that event. As I said at the beginning, it was the second of our post-COVID get-togethers. It was great to be in Bristol, a city which is vibrant, exciting, busy, buzzing, and while we were there, we were very excited to be part of, or to have the announcement from the Minister, Neil O'Brien, that funding was coming forward for another regeneration project. So Marvin, perhaps I can ask you first of all to give us your reflections and also to say thank you so much for giving us such a wonderful, warm welcome in Bristol.
No, it was fantastic to host in the city. I think there are a number of elements to it that particularly stand out to me. One is the chance to get people together from a range of different backgrounds, from different starting positions and with different worldviews, thinking about some of the complex challenges that we face. It is one of my laments in the city that the quality of our public debate is really poor. And that's not helped by the Twitterization of debate. And to be perfectly frank, not to offend any journalists, because there are some fantastic journalists, but when journalists are competing with Twitter to get clicks, and things become binary, they're simplified, they're turned into outrage and adversarialism. And that does not create the space for us to have the kind of rounded, multidimensional, nuanced conversations that we need to have, in which we also have to acknowledge that no solution comes without a price to be paid. The world is so complex that everything has a downside. And I think that was great. And not only did we have that space, but we were in our very selves being there, an example of the fact that we can actually do that.
Reflections. So you can certainly ask me. Of course, I wasn't there.
Thank you. Goodbye.
I started as the Vice Chancellor and President of the University of Bristol on the 1st of September. So I'm 3 Prime Ministers down and 5 Secretaries of State. And to your point, Marvin, by working together, I've certainly found since I've arrived, and I've now joined almost every fortnight Marvin's One City call, that actually big tent conversations, really practical ones, happen in the Mayor's office every day. And actually that's where we need to go, from the kind of big, broad, bold thinking into practical day-to-day delivery. And one of the reasons that I can be here on this stage, even though I wasn't there in July, is that the University of Bristol is bigger than any single individual. Royal Charter in 1909, been through many wars, been through much political and social turmoil, and actually what we can do is be the anchor point, like all universities across the UK. And there are such great universities from Cornwall through up to the Highlands and Islands, which can actually act as those long-standing anchor points, which can just roll with political punches and still be there in the morning. I like Twitter myself, but at the moment it's not actually attacking me. And I'm waiting for that.
Give it
moment.
time.
And of course, nobody can, I'm not up for election. So I think if you have a university in your zone or a further education college, we are your allies for the levelling up investment, the clusters, because whatever happens locally, nationally, internationally, politically, we will still be there, not just thinking, but also delivering for our city and our region. And so it's been a huge privilege to actually be able to see how universities and the city of Bristol are able to put big tent ideas into action every day, even if sometimes the traffic is a little slow.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Evelyn. And we've now got a short film by Andy Frankson, who's the co-founder of Target Student. And those of you that were in Bristol will remember the Pitch Pit. And Andy's team were one of the successful, this is really hard to say, Pitch Pit pitchers. Anyway, this is their film, I hope. Hello. Do we have it?
Hello everyone at the Leaders Summit today. Firstly, we're really sorry we can't be there with you today, but very much with you in spirit. My name's Andy, I'm the co-founder of Target Student, and we want to change the way in which the world engages with students in their home. We do this by managing the UK's leading digital network of billboards within university accommodation. We have over 100 screens in our network across 36 towns and cities, reaching over 80,000 students every day and counting, and work with a lot of the private market. Because of the success in this, we're now starting to work with university-owned buildings. So our affiliation with the Big Tent stems back to an opportunity to pitch at their event in Bristol in Queen Square through their relationship with TechSpark UK. And it was a really memorable experience for us as co-founders. It was great to see all the other startups that were pitching, who we'd obviously got to know on the raising circuit. And it was like a mini festival meets Dragon's Den sort of pitch. We both loved the charm of it. We genuinely owe a lot to Ben and the team because it kickstarted our pre-seed investment. We managed to secure 2 investors at that event for £50,000 as a result of the Big Tent. We have now closed that round of 180,000. We've also hired 4 brilliant people so we can now deliver our roadmap for the business for the next 12 months. So thank you very much for listening to me speak today. I hope the event goes well today, and yeah, have a great rest of the year.
Andy from the, Andy Frankson, Target student, so that was very good. I mean, for those of you that were there, you will recall the extraordinary range of people, the extraordinary sights. I've already talked about hay bales, but, you know, where else could you see an angel skating through the park? Where else could you get such amazing food as that fabulous restaurant that we went to that I can't remember the name of, but I know Stephen and I walked for miles to find it. But it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it. So Bristol was great, Coventry was great, and I know York is going to be great next year, but more of that later. For now, Marvin and Evelyn, thank you very much. And now let us move on, please. Thank you so much. To making rural regeneration a reality. Again, going back to Bristol, we had a speech, presentation actually from Bilbao, which I think was one of the highlights. And it was about regeneration of an area that had been very prosperous and then had fallen by the wayside, and, you know, damaged by the weather and the industrial decline and stuff. But it was a fascinating presentation, and the councillor who came there, I think, was fantastic and inspired many, many people. I know I was absolutely transfixed. So continuing in that international theme, today it gives us great pleasure to welcome two colleagues from Germany, Karlheinz Roth and Herbert Schreiner. If you'd like to come to the stage, please, gentlemen. And just while they're making their way to the stage, for those of you that weren't there, or even those that were there and would like to reacquaint themselves, you can pick up copies of this fantastic report, the Big Ideas report from Bristol, and it's outside in reception and probably downstairs when you get teas and drinks and coffees and things. Okay.
Should I take place? Or
yes, please take your place. You're going to have a presentation? Okay. Yeah. Do you need to stand here? Or you want to? Yes.
I think it's better.
Yeah? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm going to, I don't know your name. Which one? Okay. All right. Okay. So first of all, we're having a presentation. Karlheinz, if I hand over to you and you do the presentation, thank you, and we'll have a chat afterwards. Okay.
Thank you. So first of all, I say hello from Germany. It is a big pleasure for us to be here and part of Radix Big Tent. First of all, I have to say sorry because my English isn't as well as yours. So I say sorry for all the mistakes they will follow the next minutes during my presentation. We are here. We are very proud to be here. I will introduce my colleague, Mr. Herbert Schreiner, the former major of Frauenau. My name is Karlheinz Roth. I'm the major of Spiegelau. We have very small villages in our country, in Germany, in Lower Bavaria. That's in the southeast. I will show you later. And we have made digitalization real in a rural area. First of all, before I start, it was very interesting for me to hear that Great Britain is over-centralized. I'm very happy that I'm a German mayor and not a mayor in Great Britain, because we have a lot of competences, and we have over 2,600 mayors only in Bavaria. That's, I think, it shows the differences, and I'm very happy to talk with you about these differences we see. On the first sheet, you see a lot of things. You see the World Summit Awards. That's the contest of the United Nations in digitalization. We Frauenau and Spiegelau, had the honor that we are representing Germany in this contest. It's like the Eurovision Song Contest, you know. Great Britain and Germany are also very successful over the last places that are our places, you know. So we won the German contest, and so we won against Munich, we won against Berlin with our solutions in digitalization. We also won another prizes from our Chancellor Minister, the silver medal. First place, Hamburg. You all know Hamburg, the hamburger, yeah. And the second place that was Spiegelau and Frauenau, and the third place was Darmstadt, the digital city, Darmstadt near Frankfurt. So we are in the middle of the digitalization. Also, we are a very small area in Bavaria. So where do we come from? You see here, this is Bavaria, and here is the southeast, and here is the southeast of Lower Bavaria, the border to the Czech Republic, and the border to Austria. And in the year 2017, there was a contest in Germany, in Bavaria, that about the digital villages. The idea of this contest was that in the rural areas in Bavaria, there are certain challenges, and the idea of the contest was that digitalization can help with these challenges. And we have a lot of ideas, and we won with these ideas, so we can implement these ideas in the last years. Our two communities are very, very small. We have only 6,800 residents, 4,000 in Spiegelau, 2,800 residents in Frauenau. And yeah, it's not a question of size, but the question of ideas if you want to have success. But I think we won't have so many access if it wouldn't be possible to have so many competences in the regions. The German mayors and the Bavarian mayors are very strong mayors. We have a lot of competences in our community. A lot of decisions can be decided only in our community. So it is possible to realize very quickly good ideas. So now, what was the motivation and what was the beginning? The first contact with digitalization was in 2004. It's a long time ago, and this time there was no infrastructure, no digital infrastructure in the rural areas of Germany and in the rural areas of Bavaria. And I believe in the rural areas. I think the rural areas are the areas of the future. I think all the trends we see, the global trends we see, like quality of living, like the energy themes, the climate themes, they all the themes that we are thinking since a lot of years. And so I think we have a future in the rural areas. And my motivation was that the rural areas can also have can take part of the prosperity of Germany, like the urban regions. And it's a policy, a strategy of the Bavarian policy that there are the same standards of life, and it doesn't matter if you are in urban cities or if you're in rural areas. And my idea, my vision was that glass fiber is also in the rural areas. And I am the inventor of a big financial supporting program of infrastructure in Bavaria for realizing glass fiber also in the rural areas. It was my idea in 2004, and it was the beginning of digitalization and the history of digitalization for myself. And the year 2014, I became mayor with only 33 years. And then I can realize this program, I can make this dream real in my own community. You see a lot of projects we realized in the last year. It's only possible because I only have 15 minutes to take a few spotlights here. But we have a lot of ideas, and our ideas are ideas that we are made with our people. We develop the ideas with our people because we think if you develop ideas with the people, then they will profit of these ideas if you implement these ideas of the realization. At the beginning, we have an analog school. We have paper, we have pencils, but we don't have wireless LAN. We don't have glass fiber into the school. Now there is modern media. We have schools, classrooms with tablets in it, and we have digitalization in all classroom. There is a concept of Bavaria for digitalization, and Spiegelau and Freeman now fulfill all points of this concept. It's not all communities of Bavaria fulfill this concept, but we do. We have a digital library, so you can borrow books on the analog way and in the digital way. You can borrow analog books, you can borrow digital books. Our digital books increased in the 60,000 medias with only €15 a year to pay. Then you can borrow everything you want and that you need, and for very low budget. So everyone can take part of it. We programmed a town hall app. I don't know if it's the real word. Our administration is full digital. So we didn't need paper for 2 years. We didn't order paper for 2 years. My own office is completely without paper. And the workflows we have are very efficient. So we have not we don't need so many resources. We don't need so many human resources and financial resources, because we invest in these structures and in the workflows. The app is an app that also people can part of the decisions. So, for example, if a citizen of us goes to our park and he sees, oh, there is a tree over the way, he can take a photo and he can send a message to us. This message lands in a workflow, and this workflow goes on until the problem is solved. After that, the citizen got the message that the problem is solved. But also the other way, we have the possibility that we can take a push message to our citizens. For example, if there are problems in the water, or if there is a crisis like Corona, then we can talk with them. We can send a push message to all of our people. It's a very efficient way. It's also possible that I can send a message from here, from London to Spiegelau on our digital information boards if I want. It's very easy, and I can steer my town hall from Great Britain if I want. We also do a lot of further education for our seniors, because the generation that can profit the most is the senior generation. But just this generation has the most problems to use the digital advices and the digital possibilities. So we talked with the seniors, and we found possibilities to go to find ways for them to go to digitalization. I hope you know what I mean. We also have Medialand, that was a side project, and we have digital supported home visits. Our village has 33 small villages, and it's it's a very low density. We have over 40 square kilometers. It's our area, and there are 33 small villages. So it's, for our doctors, it's a very big challenge to visit all of the people who live there. And it's important for the people that the doctor came, because it's a personal contact, and contacts are very important for the people that live in our region. And so we digital supported them. We have the possibility that the doctor came digital to the people at their homes. We also realized a co-working space. It's not the classical co-working space you know in London, but a smaller one where you perhaps if you come to vacation in our national park, we have the first national park in Germany, then you have the possibility to go in the co-working space for 1 hour, for more hour, and so you can spend time for your emails. After that, you can spend time with your family. So there are no problems to combine both in the hotel rooms, you know. We also have digital solutions for our guests. We are a hiking area, so you can earn digital hiking pins in Germany. You can. We have apps for our societies. We have embedded assisted living, and we have also a digital supported shuttle bus. You can book a bus in Germany, in Spiegelau, for €1 to go, and you can drive the last mile with this bus. It's the big challenge for our people is that they want to stay there where they live or their whole life, and to make their life possible, to go shopping and so on. They also have to go to the main village of our villages, and therefore there is the supported bus a very useful help to stay there where they love to live. I hope you understand that it was very difficult now for me. Yeah, that is our central platform. For us, digitalization is a house. There are certain rooms, and rooms are the areas of life. There is the school, there is the administration, there are the tourists, there are the societies, and all of the ideas go in a big platform. It is called Daheim 4.0. I can't translate that. Daheim is Lower Bavarian speech, and it means at home. It's our home. So we combine the home with the modern topic of digitalizations. And with this method, it was possible that a lot of people take part of this project, even if they are old or young. They were part of this project, and we have a lot of supporters of this project. Yeah, the Town Hall app here, a special one sheet for it. The challenge was that we had no digital office in Germany, always said Germany, so big isn't Spiegelau in Freeman. We had no digital office in Spiegelau in Freeman, and our goal was that we had a direct communication between our administration and our citizens, and we made it real with our app. What's very important is that also the societies had the possibility to be part of this app. If there are some highlights, there is ein Fest. This is an Fest. A festival, very good. Okay. If there is a festival or so on, they can put their announcements into this app, and everyone has it on his smartphone, and it's also part of our information boards, our digital information boards. It's also a solution that we can save nature, because we don't need paper, and we have no pollution below these information boards, like the analog information boards. Here you see the change. These information boards before. The waste isn't on the picture, it's below here. And these are the new one with a dialogue solution. Also the political themes, but also the festivals, and everything what happened in our small villages is on this board. Yeah, here the co-working space, we had a pilot co-working space with 5 workplaces to start, and 1 big meeting room. It was in January 2020, and it was free of charge for the first year. We have a very flexible structure to book the co-working space. You can book it weekly, daily, or by the hour. And yeah, it also was a big alternative to working at home. You know, the cocooning theme. There is there is a possibility to meet each other. There is no cocooning, and it's also very positive to reduce the CO2 because of the short distances to work. Yeah, since 2022, it's now a private company. And in 2023, there is an expansion planned, so the co-working goes on. Now it's time to finish. Thank you for the signs. We have a lot of lessons learned. The most important lesson is just do it. Our countries have the same. We all think in problems. We don't think in solutions. So let us just do it. Let us look into the future. And let us work for the future, that we have a future and our children have a future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Karlheinz Roth. So not only have you co-created this with citizens, you've co-created it with, I suppose, political opponents. So perhaps I can ask you, Herbert Scheiner, how did you manage to work together and put aside your political differences?
Yeah, hello.
Hi, hello there, welcome.
I'm proud to be here in London, and I'm proud to have such a mayor colleague as Karlheinz, and so we work together. It was außerhalb aller politischen Geschichten. Ja. Das war außerhalb aller politischen Geschichten und aller politischen Auseinandersetzungen, und wir haben uns immer gut verstanden, und wir haben trotzdem, dass wir aus CSU und SPD kommen, als Demokraten zusammengearbeitet.
I'm not even going to attempt that. Perhaps you would be so kind.
So it really was outside of any political opposition, and we basically just worked on a common grounds of good understanding and to favour democracy and the processes needed for it.
Can I ask you how you've measured success and what difference you've seen? I mean, obviously you can measure digital traffic by people engaging with the notice boards and the working hubs and the education things. But have you noticed that people are perhaps more willing to stay in their rural communities? They're not looking to escape? Or, I mean, how do you measure the success of this scheme?
Just need my translator. Yes.
I feel like I ought to be singing and dancing across the stage during these bits, or we should have lovely scenery of Germany. If you'd like to ask any questions, by the way, if you put your hands up, we can come to you quite soon.
Thank you for the question.
Did she tell you what to say?
Yeah, I suppose that was the question, but I want to go sure that it is the question. Yes, of course it's not easy to measure if you have success with the solutions or not, but there are some indicators that you see that you have success. For example, I have a neighbor, he's 75 years old, and he's the treasury master of our tennis club, and he always takes the projector with Dagobert Duck on it since 25 years. And this person said to me, hey, you have to put more in your Office app. You have to send a push about your work and so on. I never supposed that this man will use that app. And that's one example in a row of many examples. And if we see how the users increased of our app, we see that our solutions are real. The second point is that we have a modern style of our community now, and so we get a lot of companies in the last years that also did it. We have companies. They are in case of electric vehicle, an industrial company who invested 4 million euros. It's a lot of money for our region. We have in EDV. IT. We have IT companies that go to Spiegelau because of the solutions, and I'm sure that if you have a vision, and if you look into the future, if you communicate this vision, you will be able that there are people that go with you and create this future.
Okay, this is a question for Herbert, but I'm going to ask you for. Can we know your name?
Sandra.
Sandra, thank you. Otherwise, goodness me, this is like a Brian Ricks farce, isn't it? In a minute, a vicar's going to come out of the wardrobe with his trousers on. Flexible. Well, you're very flexible, clearly. Yes. So, was there any resistance to this? Were people sceptical? I don't know what Sandra's saying to him.
Nein, es gab keine größeren Widerstände, ganz im Gegenteil. Wir haben die Leute faszinieren können mit dieser Idee. Und wir haben, wenn ich jetzt zurückdenke, dann haben wir eigentlich in großen Arbeitskreisen dieses digitale Dorf gewählt.
Well, I think there was no resistance whatsoever. People were quite fascinated by the idea. And if I think back, then really it was within different working groups that we sort of broadcast the idea, and people were just really enthusiastic about it.
Thank you. Are there any questions? A gentleman at the front and then a gentleman there. Oh, very kind.
Collaboration, wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Absolutely. Obviously, I agree with you. Rural areas are fantastic from a quality of living point of view. One of the things, I'm Simon Bilcliffe. I stood for the Yorkshire Party for South Yorkshire Mayor, which is one of the mayor areas of the United Kingdom. One of the things that you mentioned on there, slightly tangentially, is the bus that you can get for €1 anywhere. Most people don't realise a third of households in the United Kingdom don't have any form of independent transport. And so bus services is really very important and very broken. How does that work within your app for commercially? Because €1 is a very small amount when you've got 33 villages and all this kind of stuff. And how did you integrate that with the bus service? Because that is a big piece of technology that you've had to do, and you seem to have got it done very successfully. And personally, that's incredibly impressive, that one bit alone to make it
and rural broadband, which is the other key to
absolutely,
this.
huge.
So are you happy to answer those? Or yes, okay.
I think it's possible.
Gentleman over there.
I understood the question, I think.
Good.
First of all, one of the big visions of the digital villages was that our citizens are possible to organize their lives itself as long as they can live for itself. So it's a very big social component in it, and with the bus, this dream becomes a little part of real. The financial structure is very important. We have the luck that our state, Bavaria, finances the deficit of the bus for about 50%. It was a digressive financiation, first of all 70% and now 50% of the deficit. The rest has to be paid from ourselves. It is a bus that doesn't drives all the time. The bus drive only if you call him. It's a calling bus system, like a taxi. First of all, the people were very skeptic. They said, how should I wait for a bus and the bus doesn't come? What should I do then? So I drove with them. I go with them into this bus, and we drove to the Wirtshaus. We said we take one beer together, and then it's like like a taxi. The bus is like a taxi, and this was a very easy message, and everyone understands this easy message, and the bus goes very successful. Very important was that the implementation of the bus, because if you want to implement a bus with digital system, you have to implement an analog bus at first. And we asked our people, where has the bus to go? Where has the bus to stop? It was not our idea. And I said to our citizens, you have to say it to me. You are the users of the bus, not me. And they come to me. We were 70 people, and they discussed in a democratic history. I never forget this hour. They discussed the seniors. It was a dream for me. And the solution was the concept for the bus. The politics doesn't change this solution. We take this solution and take it one-to-one into reality. And that's a very important part, and a very important part of the digital villages, the idea of the villages, that the people create, not the politic.
Yeah.
Sorry, just because I'm very aware of time.
Just
go on. Yeah, go on.
Wir haben ja zusätzlich zu dem Bus auch eine zusätzliche der Bahn, die unsere beiden Orte miteinander verbindet. Das ist das eine, und das andere ist, dass diese ganze Geschichte Digitalisierung dort abgegangen ist. Die ist von unten gekommen, von den Menschen gekommen, und wir haben oben die Entscheidung getroffen.
So maybe I should add, regarding the local public transport, we also actually have a train service that connects our two villages every hour. But regarding digitalization, it really was a bottoms-up approach, and we just then took the political decisions to implement what the citizens wanted.
Thank you. And the gentleman over there who's been waiting a long time, and I'm really sorry, but I am getting evil eyes. Oh, jolly good. Okay, go on then.
I was just wondering, this is fascinating technology, but have you done any work on how scalable it would be in a bigger city environment? And are any of your colleagues in bigger cities looking to copy what you've done?
Okay. Think about the answer to that. How scalable in a big city? Very quickly, person up there, I can't quite see you. Lady with a hand up. Quickly.
My question is, the big step that we get in our country is not driven by being in a rural community. How do you fund this, and do you pay a local tax?
Okay, so can it be scaled up for cities, and how is it funded? Is it through local tax? And if you can be quick with your answers, that would be great, because I've got to move on to the next thing. Yeah?
If you have the people behind you, you can really do it anywhere at all, whether in cities or in rural areas.
Also think so, and it was financed for ourselves for the first, but there is a lot of money from the state, from Bavaria, and I think it's a very positive model if the ideas are local and the support is from the state. That's the key for success, I think.
Maybe it goes back to what Lord Heseltine was saying about mayors, because you were a mayor and you are a mayor, so maybe that's the answer. But I did hear you mention taking a beer. That might be the secret.
Beer is very important.
And we are very happy to take this further in discussions on an individual level later on if you want to.
I think that would be lovely. Thank you very much, and I'm sure there are many people who would like to continue the conversations. But now, can I say thank you on behalf of us all here today to Herbert and Karlheinz. Thank you. And now, an open manifesto for a flourishing United Kingdom. Who could that possibly be? But Joe Zammit-Luthier, come up, please, and Joe is a familiar face to many of you, I'm sure. Trustee and driving force with Radix Big Tent. Joe.
Thank you. Hello. I was going to have a couple of slides, but it doesn't look like it, so it doesn't matter.
Do we have
so
slides?
we're going into the workshop sessions now, and I just wanted to outline what these workshop sessions are about. So one of the projects we're trying to do, at some stage we will have an election in this country. Maybe sometime in 2024, who knows. And political parties have manifestos for elections. And what we wanted to do is to put together our own mock manifesto, which we can then put out to the main political parties and say, here's an a la carte menu. If there's anything you like here, take it, use it, modify it, or put it in the bin if you don't like it. And to get to this manifesto, we'd like all of you and all your friends to participate and to put in your ideas that we can then refine through discussion. But there are tramlines in terms of what we need and what we'd like to see. The first is that we don't want a litany of problems. We know the problems. What we'd like is some kind of steps forward. I don't think we have magic solutions or anybody has magic solutions, but we'd like to focus on steps forward rather than a list of what the issues are. The second is that whatever we produce has to be both practically and politically viable. And viable to be delivered in a 5-year parliamentary term. So no boil the ocean ideas where we're going to change everything overnight. What is practical, what can be done within the lifetime of a parliament, and what is likely to be politically viable for a political party to actually put it in their manifesto. The third element is, if it involves spending money, then we need to know where's that money going to come from. Because it's very easy to say, spend more money on this, spend more money on this, pay these people more, but where is the money going to come from? Now, we don't need down to the penny accounting, and neither do we want generic statements like tax the rich more. The question is, if you want to spend money, it's got to come from somewhere, and we need to have some ideas on where that might come from and what we're going to spend less on if you want to spend more on your own favorite hobby horse. And it's been so far a very interesting exercise, and you'll see some of our initial ideas in the workshops, but the most interesting bit to me has been to realize just how difficult it is to come up with something that fulfills this criteria. We're always very happy to criticize politicians, to say that they don't know what they're doing, that they don't ever do anything. But when we actually try to produce something that's practical and doable, we ourselves find it extremely difficult. So I'd encourage you to participate, and we all want your ideas. Once we have some background and something to start with, as we'll start with the workshops today, we'll then pressure test it through discussions, roundtables, the next summit, the next festival next year, and hopefully come up with something that is actually viable and that maybe somebody, somewhere, in some political party might actually find useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So I'm guessing that you've all picked up one of these, and I'm guessing that those of you who've signed up to workshops have worked out where you're going. So go, enjoy, do all the things that Joe has just suggested, and please be back here at 5:40, so in 1 hour, when we'll have a quick roundup from the rapporteurs and a bit of news about next year's festival and other lovely things. So enjoy. Thank you. If you could take your seats, please, I'd be very grateful. And if the rapporteurs could sit at the front, please. Okay. Right, can you make your way to your seats, please? And could the rapporteurs for the workshop sessions please sit at the front? Okay. Could you take your seats, please? Could I please ask people to come in, take their seats, and could rapporteurs please sit at the front? Yeah. Right, are we waiting for any more stragglers from the workshops? Right, they need to come down the stairs quickly. Right. Are we waiting for any more people to come in from the workshops? Yes, by the look of it. Are you from the workshops? Hello. If you've got a rapporteur amongst your people, please sit at the front. Annie, Right, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, please. Could people come in, make their way in and take a seat, please? We need to hear the report back from the workshop sessions. So, could you please raise your hand if you're a rapporteur from one of the workshops? Do we have anybody who's a rapporteur? Ah, gentleman here.
I think it's not the rapporteurs making the report, it's the person.
Oh.
Saba, Vicky.
Right. Okay. Right, I'm going to start now. If people could make their way to their seats. And could I ask, is there somebody here to report back on the Achieving Sustainable Long-Term Economic Recovery and Growth? Is that Saba? Is Saba here? Right, please. Would you like to give us your report and stick to time? Okay. Otherwise, Ben will kill me.
Okay. So our report was, the main issues that were coming up were very much around decentralization, going from a big centralized melting pot into the local regions, empowering cities a lot more to determine the types of skills, the types of enterprise relationships that people wanted to have. There was another big issue that was discussed, which was around skills, especially the latest technology skills. But the issue we have with the younger generation and people at schools is that somebody made a very valid comment, is that the teaching staff can't keep up to date with all the developments in the science and technology that's currently taking place. We also had a comment on, at the moment there's tax relief on debt, but should that actually shift to the equity situation? and the lack of investment in childcare, so enabling more people to go back to work, contribute a lot more tax pounds back to the Treasury, but we need a better solution to enable people to go back to work and women to go back to work and to be a lot more inclusive.
Thank you. That was very concise. Let that be a lesson to the rest of you. Very good. Okay. Magda, are you reporting back on your session?
Yes, so we...
So could people take their seats, please? Okay. Magda, do you want to come up here, have a microphone? So this is investing for broad-based economic growth.
Yes, that, and also specifically how to mobilize the savings that are currently sitting in pension pots in the UK to support British growth and levelling up, also green transition. So it was a very passionate discussion. We could not finish on time. So I think we have a seminar on our hands and tons of speakers and blogs already coming. So there was a very broad agreement that pension system must change, but the problem is incredibly complex because it's a problem of both the structure, thinking, how we think about risk, how we think about the desired outcomes, and also how we think about the role of regulation, competition, what kind of degree of competition is good or bad. And also, we discussed quite a lot of how we could change incentives to create better outcomes. So I think that the broad agreement there is that indeed the pension system needs to change, and there has to be a consolidation in the pension system so that we don't have 5,000 defined benefit schemes, but rather a few larger pots of money, maybe more similar to what we have in Canada or Australia, to then benefit from the economies of scale, but also of a much more professional running of those funds. And when it comes to risk, we also don't have to think only about financial risk, but also the risk of actually underinvesting and taking too little risk, because then the risk is you don't generate growth. And that is also a major risk. And when we think about the macroprudential risk, say, if regulators think about macroprudential risk, they not only have to think about losing money in the short term, but actually losing potential to generate money in the future. So that is one of the big findings of the discussion. Multiple stakeholders have to be involved. Some of the discussants said we actually have to scrap the system and start from new because we are stuck in a very bad system. It also shows you how difficult it is to get out of the old system and introduce that radical change. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Great. Do I have somebody from a better and more sustainable NHS and social care? Hello.
You do. So we had NHS and social care to deal with, and the four main themes before we started were around funding and did there need to be a Royal Commission to look at how the NHS was funded, about how we address the NHS being the litigation capital of the world, and then workforce and public health. And I think the two sort of big shifts that came out of the session, it was really energetic, it was a fantastic session, were that we needed to think about what health and social care needs to look like in 20 years' time, and to do a proper co-production, a complete redesign, and establish what people could reasonably expect and their varying expectations. And then I think the other big thing which came out was that we needed to really energize and empower clinicians, because there was a dearth of leadership in both NHS and in public health. And we saw a glimpse of what is possible if you do give clinicians the opportunity to lead at the beginning of COVID, when there was a brief transformation, but unfortunately it's gone back to the way it was.
Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. Monetary policy, financial stability and a prosperous economy. I came in on the end of that and just heard something about changing the Monetary Committee of the Bank of England. Is that you, Vicky? Are you going to do this one? Microphone. Look here, have a handheld, it's much easier.
I think there are actually sort of two of us. You may want to add another word or two. I'll go first, and we can share it. So we were looking at whether we needed to change the whole structure of our monetary policy decision-making. Of course, if you really want to change something, then you must start from the premise that something is wrong with where we are now. there wasn't complete agreement in our session about whether things needed to change, but if there were, the emphasis seemed to be of the discussion on how we can democratize it all a little bit more, because yes, the Bank of England is independent, but it does get a remit from the government, but we don't actually know exactly how various decisions are made, and the implications for growth and unemployment could be very significant, and therefore you can't say it's not politicized. So there was a big debate about that, and whether there should be a lot more control of what the decision-making process is, whether we should have different committees that oversee it, whether Parliament actually should be slightly more involved than it is at present in scrutinizing what's going on, whether they should be more involved in even appointing the members, and whether even the targets should be changed. And Kofi, you may want to add.
Yeah, ever so quickly. So
Take the microphone.
So the kind of key question we had was, do we change the way in which the Bank of England works? And we had 3 sub-questions. So firstly, should we change the target inflation rate from 2% to 4%? Should the Bank of England, should the Bank of England tools, be changed so they can see any kind of financial problems coming from the horizon and report it to the public? And I think in terms of, they should also report to the contribution to wealth inequality by fiscal or monetary policies, and basically just make the Bank of England more transparent. As Vicky was saying, there was 2 new committees that was proposed in the background paper. Well, I have 2 mics. 2 committees that were proposed in the background paper. One full of economists, not academic economists.
Microphone.
This one's as well.
Oh, you've got one
Yeah. One full of economists working for NGOs and other organizations, not just academic economists, and also business people involved in the business world. And then the kind of democratic side, so the MPs having a bit more oversight in exactly how things are run. As Vicky said, it was a very heated, not heated, but it was an interesting debate, and it came to the end that there needs to be some process. We just don't know exactly how it's going to work for everyone.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Then Britain's role in the reconstruction of Ukraine. Who's doing that?
So we discussed the financial implications of the conflict in Ukraine and the destruction that's been caused, and what we could do to find those funds, and what we could really do to enable reconstruction in Ukraine, and what the UK's role is in that. And we didn't have time to cover it all because it's quite a lot. We started with the fact that we need to acknowledge destruction in Ukraine as a result of the recent conflict. It has many different facets. We're not just talking about physical destruction, we're talking about political destruction, we're also just talking about destruction of culture as well. And we really need to ensure that any conversations around reconstruction take all 3 of those components into account. We talked about the financial requirements to support reconstruction in Ukraine, the World Bank estimate of $350 billion, and we identified that that's actually not an insurmountable figure. While it vastly exceeds the annual global ODA budget, actually, if we're looking at a combination of really clear targeted private sector investment in Ukraine, recovery of stolen assets, use of Russian central bank assets that are frozen in many states all over the world that actually amount to nearly a $350 billion in themselves, and the right legal framework to enable us to use those frozen assets for the recovery and reconstruction in Ukraine. The money's not the issue, it's how we bring all of that together, how we bring the state infrastructure, the private sector infrastructure, and the delivery of that all together. And we were really, really clear that we couldn't have this conversation without Ukrainian voices in the room, and we almost fell foul of that, and it was important to recognize that, that we didn't want to have that conversation. There were lots of really good ideas shared in the room, but I think actually when we what hit it on the head was looking at Ukrainian voices and Ukrainian diaspora and investment through the Ukrainian diaspora in multiple different countries will really, really help to ensure that we're targeting those 3 elements of destruction: physical, political, and cultural. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And finally, secure and affordable housing for a thriving economy. Who's doing that? Hello.
So there were a number of things to consider. The first that we sort of came to almost immediately was that we need to address the environment and net zero. It's key and it needs to be at the center of our thinking. And that's not just things like insulation, but also things like reconsidering how wise it is that new developments are almost invariably on the edge of towns, and as a result that promotes car dependency. We need to think about the supply of land and public ownership. State building of houses dropped off a cliff in 2008. Is that something that we need to revive? We sort of came to the conclusion that we certainly need to raise house building, and that seems like likely the way to do it. Taxation of real estate is currently a complete mess. We can solve it through reforms and more equitable means of taxation, but it's going to take some really brave politicians to do that. And finally, there needs to be a repositioning of rental in order to make it seem more attractive, like how it is in other European countries, along with changes to it in order to make it more secure and affordable, as the name of the paper would suggest, again, much like how it is in much of continental Europe.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So that's just a flavour of 6 conversations, but the breadth of knowledge and interest in those conversations is an indication and an endorsement, I suppose, of what Radix Big Tent is about. It's bringing people together to have good conversations, to share, to exchange, to disagree in a civil way, but to move forward. It's not, as Joe was saying earlier, about a list of problems. It's about how we come up with solutions. So, to continue our conversation, next year we will be taking the Radix Big Tent Festival somewhere else. I think I might have already revealed where it is going to be. But pretend you didn't hear that and pretend to be surprised when I introduce Councillor Keith Aspden from York.
Thank you very much. I did hear York sort of slip out earlier in the day.
It was a mistake,
so you'll be pleased that as the leader of York Council, that is what I'm here to announce. So I'm really pleased to be here today. I haven't got the wrong script in front of me. It's been great to witness today some of the impact and legacy of the Big Tent, and be that in securing investment for local entrepreneurs, influencing policy, the political discussions that have taken place, just like that feedback that we heard, and contributing to the Open Manifesto. That's why I'm really pleased to announce that the Big Tent Festival and Summit will be taking place in York on the 15th and 16th of June next year. I hope that you have already had a chance to visit York. I often say it's a city that doesn't need an introduction, and then as council leader it's too tempting to talk a little bit about the city. It's a short train ride for many of you from London, even shorter from those from Yorkshire and elsewhere. From the Romans to the Vikings to the railways to chocolate, it is a city that is consistently voted the best place to live and to work in the country. I'm incredibly proud to be from York. It's an exciting time for our city. We embark on a number of major schemes that are going to be shaping the city's future for decades to come. And just to name one example, work is underway on the game-changing York Central scheme, just in the heart of the city behind the railway station, with hundreds of millions of pounds of public funding secured, which is unlocking the site and delivering the infrastructure that's needed. As we sit and stand here today, a bridge is being put into place. That gives us a real golden opportunity to deliver housing, commercial land, new public spaces, a new National Railway Museum for the city, and has contributed to us being able to put a strong case to the government for Government Hub, working with the Government Property Agency, and the bid to be the HQ of GBR, or whatever the government policy ends up on that particular initiative. As many of you will know, York, alongside our neighbours in North Yorkshire, has long debated devolution. It's interesting at the start hearing Lord Heseltine's thoughts, with the goal of bringing power and funding closer to our communities. On Yorkshire Day earlier this year, I was pleased to sign a historic proposed deal from the government with Greg Clark in his second stint as Secretary of State to make that a reality. The proposed devolution deal is the only city and rural devolution deal on that scale, previously achieved by the likes of Greater Manchester, South and West Yorkshire. If agreed in the new year, a new combined authority will be created with York and North Yorkshire, with a directly elected mayor, with powers to invest 540 million of new money over the next 30 years. And that will be supported by the transfer of some powers and devolved budgets from Whitehall, meaning the mayor and local councils will have more flexibility over how best to spend that money, whether that be transport, affordable housing, economic development sites, or we've heard a lot about skills and adult learning today. In my view, the deal is not perfect, but actually there couldn't be a more important time to secure devolution and investment and really capitalise on the opportunities that our towns, cities and also rural communities have. In York, there's the Joseph Rowntree legacy, and it's very much about a city that reinvents itself and makes the best of the opportunities that we have. So, for example, today, the cutting-edge research and development that's taking place at the University of York and York St John University, for example, in rail technology through to Bio-Yorkshire and the work on agriculture. I'm proud to be part of that ambitious and transformative work. One of the areas is, of course, on climate change and how we create a sustainable future for all of our communities. Whilst lots of work is progressing, for example, the delivery of the biggest electric vehicle bus fleet and our new community woodland, councillors are also about to approve a climate change strategy. This led us to being recognised by CDP, one of the environmental impact organisations, as one of the only 122 locations across the world taking bold leadership on environmental action. And during COP26, York joined the United Nations International Centre of Excellence. Just as in the rest of the UK, in York and in local government, we are faced with unprecedented challenges, from the pandemic to the cost of living crisis to many of the things that we've discussed today. That's going to require short-term and long-term work to help communities and businesses weather that storm. And in order to do that, active work is taking place with partners to deliver those ideas and actions. For example, how to tackle poverty and health inequalities in the city. York has some truly unique opportunities as well as challenges. And the Big Ideas Festival, we hope, will be able to showcase these, challenging and engaging our active political groups and organisations in the city, as well as residents and businesses who are actively involved in shaping our city's future and the response to those challenges. We see the Big Tent Ideas Festival as an exciting opportunity to showcase the skills, experiences and knowledge that I know that York residents and businesses have to offer. I know that Ben's team is already well on the way with planning the York Festival, which is going to be taking place in the beautiful setting of Dean's Park, just next to York Minster. So another reason to visit if you have not already. And some of the city's major employers and organisations have already pledged to support this. The University of York and York St John University, as I've mentioned, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Aviva, the Design Council and York Minster. The theme of the festival is yet to be announced, but as I briefly introduced, York fits very well with the narrative of devolution and regeneration, so I'm sure we won't miss the opportunity to explore that amongst many other exciting and challenging themes, building on the work of the recent Big Tent Ideas Festival in Bristol in 2022. I very much hope to see all of you and lots of others in York in June, not only to attend Big Tent, but also spend some of your money and explore all that our city has to offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to it. Thank you very much. And I think, Ben, you would like to say a few words.
So I'm just going to do very briefly, before George concludes, a few parish notices, if I may. So can I firstly just say huge thank you to Joe for chairing us and steering us through to a ridiculous timetable, and you've kept us to it remarkably well. Thank you to all of you for taking part in the discussions that we've just had around our Open Manifesto. And just to be clear, at the festival in Bristol, as Joe mentioned, we were able to capture your ideas in the New Ideas report, and please do take away a copy and study this. We're going to be doing something different out of this summit because we want to capture the ideas that have come out of the workshops and work towards creation of the Open Manifesto. So we'll be coming back to all of you and inviting you to take part in further discussions around the topics as we put together that Open Manifesto. So thank you to all of you for that. Secondly, by way of parish notice, we're going to then send you a survey to ask you what you thought of it and how we can improve our day. Please do complete that and don't feel the need to be particularly kind. But if you like what we're doing and you've enjoyed today, please support us by becoming a friend of Radix Big Tent. We ask for a regular payment. We don't charge for any of our events, but if you become a friend, you're able to come to some extra events, enjoy some extra, our daily political briefing and some special events. And for example, next week, we're looking forward to inviting the former Treasury Minister Theo Agnew will be joining us to talk about the future of the Treasury. So that's the incentive to become a friend tonight. If you join us tonight, you'll get an invitation to join us for that discussion with Theo next week. Thank you very much for joining us. And to conclude the first part, the formal part of our evening, George.
Thanks, Ben. Good news, this will be really short because drinks are waiting. I wanted just to, there's a few thank yous, but first of all, to highlight the importance of the York announcement. This whole festival, this programme, the Big Tent Ideas Festival in combination with Radix, is all about bringing Westminster out of the bubble, out of this very strange little cluster here in London, out onto the front line of those people and places, those communities where the challenges that we debate here are actually being lived. And I'm absolutely thrilled that we're going to York. Just to remind you, this will be, what will this be? This will be our 6th festival, I think. First in Reading, all good festivals start in Reading. Second, Cambridge. Third, Mudchute. 4, Coventry. 5, Bristol. 6, York. And Keith, thank you for, where are you? Thank you for hosting us. We're nothing without the welcome and the hospitality and the support of a local leader, local leaders and the place. And our commitment to you is that we will bring the most exciting thinkers up to York and galvanise the most exciting thinking in York and try and make a difference as we bring our festival up. And I think one of the exciting things we've done in Coventry and in Bristol with Marvin's help is to make a difference in a whole series of spin-out projects, which we don't, I think, do enough to tell the story of because they are created by you, by all of you who support this project. But Keith, thank you. You've put your trust in us and we won't let you down. Can I also just thank Marvin, where is Marvin, for hosting us in Bristol. It was a fantastic event in quite a difficult political situation, and we cut through all the noise and galvanised, I think, and connected with a really important and radical debate there, and to get a minister to come and announce serious regeneration funding for Bristol and to pay tribute to Marvin's leadership, I think was all to the good. Can I also thank Karlheinz for coming? The international aspect here is completely key. We've been inspired by what other cities and places around Europe are doing. Part of my original thinking was that we create a Big Tent Europe and we link up. In fact, part of the original thinking for the Big Tent Festival was that appalling gun massacre on that Swedish island. And as we all sat and observed in horror the killing, I was also wondering, what were they all doing on that island? How fantastic. Why don't we have political festivals like that here in the UK? And that is part of what we're trying to do, to create a place where people can, of all political affiliations and none, can come together. And whether we're in the European Union or not, we're all in the European community of nations and neighbours. And it's really lovely to have you here. Thank you. I wanted also to thank Evelyn and Andy and all of those who sponsored and convened all those talks this afternoon. And put on record again my thanks to Michael Heseltine for coming and kicking us off. I think you could feel in the room, whatever one's political affiliation, respect for his long-standing commitment to this agenda that Radix and Big Tent are pursuing in combination. This is like being the groom at my own wedding, or maybe it's funeral. I wanted to thank Stephen Kinnock. Where is he? Stephen, one of the good guys, and Stephen and I went head-to-head in batting for EFTA. Do you remember during all those EU talks? And at times I suspect we both thought it would have been a rather better outcome than where we've ended up. But I hope that you can see in his and my commitment to MPs on the front benches of our parties. Yes, we have political differences. There's going to be a general election coming, but he and I are absolutely committed to this agenda, and that all parties should grip it and own it and seize it. And I hope, Stephen, that you and I can prove Michael wrong, and that we can drive the renewal of South Wales. I'm excited by getting Space Forge, a brilliant company, taking a compound semiconductor factory into space. It's a briefcase, into space, landed in Cardigan Bay to create the compound semiconductors because it's cheaper than building a vast multi-fab factory. And that semiconductor corridor, which will drive the renewal of the South Wales manufacturing economy for the next generation. Lastly, Ben, Georgie, Joe, all the team, a lot of work goes into this behind the scenes to make it so effortless. Thank you for it all. I'm going to give you a last chance for a round of applause. All those patrons and members and friends, whether you're giving a little or a lot, we just couldn't do it without you, and it doesn't cost nothing. There's quite a lot of work goes in behind the scenes, so a sincere thank you. It's easy to come up with ideas. It's quite another thing to see this project over 6 years grow and develop momentum. And if you're not a friend, please do join us, and if you're not a patron or a donor, sponsor, please do talk to Georgie. Most of all, can I thank you for coming and giving us your time, giving us your expertise, giving us your energy, giving us the benefit of the doubt. Challenging stale political orthodoxies is not easy. Challenging the established institutions is not easy, particularly if you're, as Stephen and I both are, slightly beholden to them. We need the help of impatient, polite, insurgent, inspired, challenging, fresh thinkers to help us be the change in mainstream politics. And that was a big part of why we set this project up. So thank you for all that you do. My plea is, can you spread the message? Not since the announcement of London 2012, the Olympics coming, has the news of Big Tent York 2023. Please spread the message, and don't just come yourselves. Bring your godchildren, bring your nephews and nieces, bring others. There are always deals to be done. We never want to have an empty tent. The big tent is about, yes, big thinkers, but it's also about big conversations and giving the people who are not normally at the party conference or in the smoke-filled room a chance to stand up on a soapbox pitch and pitch to the Secretary of State, to the thinker, to the writer, their ideas. So please do help us make a big success and showcase what York is giving this country and what the lessons of local leadership can deliver if we apply them better back here in Parliament. So I think lastly, a serious round of applause, Ben and the team, for all that you've done. Thank you for this event. It's becoming a fixture. To the drinks. Where are the drinks now, Ben?
Yes, please join us. That's the end of the formal part of the evening, but it's not the end of the entertainment. Please join us downstairs in the Marble Hall, where our speaker over drinks will be Thangam Debbonaire, and we will give you something to cheer you on your way to the football.